I said I won't go quietly. She moved like lightning. Her massive clawed hand swept out, catching two guards and sending them flying into trees with bone-crushing force. They hit hard and didn't get up. A third guard thrust his spear at her side. The silver tip bit into her flesh, and Eve roared in pain and fury. She grabbed the spear, ripped it from the guard's hands, and snapped it like a twig. "Silver can't save you," she snarled. The remaining three guards broke formation and ran. Eve let them go. She wasn't a killer, not yet. The leader, still conscious but badly injured, stared up at her from where he'd fallen. Blood trickled from his mouth. "What are you?" he gasped. Eve leaned down, her massive face inches from his. "I'm what happens when you reject the wrong woman." She left him there and disappeared into the forest. Behind her, the leader fumbled for the emergency signal horn at his belt and blew 3 sharp blasts. The sound echoed through the thornwood. In his dreams, she stood on a mountain peak, howling at the twin moons, and the sound shook the foundations of the earth. He'd wake with his chest aching and his wolf clawing at his insides, desperate to find her. The mate bond was supposed to be severed. He'd rejected her, spoken the words, broken the connection. So why did it still pull at him? "My king?" Corvus touched his arm. "Are you listening?" Fenric blinked. "What?" "I said we should mobilize the full army. Hunt this creature down before it destroys another village." "No." The word came out harsher than Fenric intended. "We don't have proof it's hostile. The survivors say it only attacked when cornered." "It killed 3 of your guards." "It defended itself against wolves carrying silver weapons," Fenric countered. His council members stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "I want it captured, alive. Bring it to me, and we'll learn what we're dealing with." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "This isn't about that girl, is it?" Fenric's head snapped toward her. "What did you say?" "Eve Ashenmore, the wolfless orphan you rejected." Seraphine's voice was sweet, but her eyes were sharp. "Some are saying the timing is suspicious. She disappeared the same day these attacks began." "She's wolfless," Fenric said flatly. "She can't shift. She's human in all but blood." "Then perhaps she's working with whatever this creature is," Seraphine suggested. "Guiding it, controlling it. Revenge for her rejection." The room went silent. Fenric felt his wolf stir, a low, warning growl that had nothing to do with the threat of the creature and everything to do with the implication that Eve was involved. "Protect mate," his wolf snarled. "Defend her." Fenric shoved the instinct down. Eve wasn't his mate. Not anymore. "I want her found," he said, "and I want the creature captured. Whatever connection exists between them, we'll discover it." Council dismissed. The room emptied quickly. Only Corvus remained. "You're making a mistake," the beta said quietly. "You should have killed the girl when you had the chance. Now she's out there poisoning your judgment." Fenric's eyes flashed. "Careful, old friend." Corvus held up his hands. "I speak only out of loyalty. The pack whispers, Fenric. They say the rejection broke you, that you still feel the bond." "The bond is severed." "Is it?" Corvus stepped closer. "Then why do you wake screaming her name? Why do you stare at the thornwood for hours like you're waiting for something? Why do you refuse to choose another mate?" Because every time Fenric even considered it, his wolf went berserk. Because the thought of touching another woman made his skin crawl. Because Eve's laugh still echoed in his mind, and her gold eyes still haunted his dreams. "Leave me," Fenric said. Corvus hesitated, then bowed. "As you command, my king." Alone, Fenric walked to the window. The thornwood stretched in the distance, dark and forbidding. Somewhere in that forest, Eve was hiding. And somewhere in that forest, a monster was killing his people. He had to find them both, even if it destroyed him. Eve crouched beside a stream, washing blood from her hands. The latest attack had been unavoidable. A group of hunters had cornered her in a ravine, and she'd fought her way out. 2 were dead. The rest had fled. She hadn't wanted to kill them, but they'd given her no choice. "This is war now," Moira said. "They will not stop until you are dead or caged." "Then I need to leave the Thornwood," Eve said. "Head north. Find answers." "The north is dangerous. The corruption grows stronger there." "Good. Maybe I'll find what's causing it." Eve stood, her reflection catching in the stream. She looked different now, harder, leaner, Her eyes, even in human form, sometimes flashed gold. I can't keep running and hiding. If I'm truly the last Lycan Queen, then I need to understand what that means. It means you carry a responsibility that could crush you, Moira warned. The Lycan Queens were not just rulers, they were guardians. They held back the darkness that threatened to consume the world. What darkness? Its name is Morveth, an entity older than the first shift. It was bound beneath the earth by your ancestors, sealed with blood magic and sacrifice. But the seal was only as strong as the Lycan bloodline. As the queens died, as the line dwindled, the seal weakened. Eve's blood ran cold. And now? Now you are the last, the only one with enough power to restore the seal or watch it crumble completely. Why didn't you tell me this before? Would you have believed me? Moira asked. You barely believed you were Lycan. How could I explain that the fate of the world rests on your shoulders? Eve sat down hard on a rock, her head in her hands. 2 weeks ago, she'd been nothing, worthless, rejected. Now she was apparently the only thing standing between the world and an ancient evil. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know how to fight gods or seal ancient evils. I'm just... You are moonborn, Moira interrupted fiercely. You are the daughter of queens who shattered mountains and commanded storms. Their power flows in your veins. Their strength is your birthright. You are not just anything, Eve. You are everything. Tears stung Eve's eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. Fine, she said, standing. Then teach me. Show me how to be what I'm supposed to be. The answers lie north. In the Frost Peak Mountains, there is a place called the Eternal Archive, a repository of knowledge from before the kingdoms. If anywhere holds the key to understanding your power and restoring the seal, it's there. How far? 2 weeks on foot, less if you run. Eve nodded. Then we leave tonight. She spent the afternoon gathering supplies, dried meat from her recent hunts, waterskins filled from the stream, furs for the cold northern nights. As the sun set and the twin moons rose, Eve took one last look at the thornwood. This forest had been her sanctuary, her prison, her awakening. Now it was time to leave it behind. She shifted, the transformation smoother now, almost natural, and launched into a run that would carry her across hundreds of miles. Behind her, the hunting parties closed in on her last known location. They would find nothing but tracks leading north, and Fenric, when he received the report, would realize exactly where she was going. The north, where legend said the first wolves had been born, where ancient magic still lingered in the stones, where the Lycan Queens had once ruled. Eve ran for 3 days straight, stopping only briefly to hunt and rest. Her Lycan form was built for endurance. She could maintain this pace for weeks if necessary. The landscape changed as she traveled. The thornwood gave way to rocky hills, then to sparse tundra. Snow began to fall, dusting her silver-black fur with white. On the 4th day, she encountered her first real obstacle. A pack border. Eve scented it before she saw the markers. Stones painted with territorial symbols, trees scratched with claw marks. This was the edge of the Frostclaw Pack's territory, one of the most savage packs in the north. They didn't welcome strangers. Go around, Moira advised. We cannot afford confrontation. But going around would add days to her journey. And Eve was done avoiding conflict. She crossed the border deliberately, leaving deep prints in the snow. Within an hour, they came. 15 wolves in their shifted forms, massive beasts with ice-blue eyes and white fur. They surrounded her, snarling, teeth bared. The largest, clearly the alpha, stepped forward. He shifted to human form, a massive man with a braided white beard and scars covering his bare chest despite the freezing cold. "You trespass, outsider," he growled in a thick northern accent. "State your business or die where you stand." Eve shifted as well, standing naked in the snow. She felt no cold. Her Lycan blood kept her warm. "I'm passing through," she said. "I seek the Eternal Archive in the Frost Peak Mountains." The Alpha's eyes narrowed. "The Archive is forbidden. None have walked those paths in centuries." "Then I'll be the first in centuries." "You'll be dead." The Alpha signaled, and his wolves closed in. "We don't allow—" He stopped mid-sentence, his nostrils flared, His eyes went wide. You, he stepped back. You carry the old blood, the moon scent. Eve tensed. What are you talking about? Lycan. The word was barely a whisper. The Alpha dropped to one knee, and his entire pack followed suit. Forgive us, Ancient One. We did not know. Eve stared in shock. What are you doing? Showing respect to the old blood. The Alpha kept his head bowed. My grandmother's grandmother spoke of your kind, the queens who came before the packs. We thought the line extinct. It nearly was, Eve said carefully. I'm the last. The Alpha looked up, his weathered face filled with something between awe and fear. Then the prophecy is true. The last queen rises when the seal breaks. Eve's heart hammered. You know about the seal? We guard the northern border for a reason, Highness, to keep what lies beneath from spreading south. He stood slowly. The corruption grows daily. Black ice spreads across our lands. Animals die without cause. The earth itself groans in pain. Morvith, Eve breathed. You know the name. It wasn't a question. Then you know what must be done. I need to reach the archive, learn how to restore the seal. The Alpha nodded grimly. Then we will escort you. The mountains are treacherous, and worse things than wolves hunt in the high peaks now. I don't need... This is not a request, Highness. The Alpha's voice was firm. If you are truly the last queen, then your survival is more important than our entire pack. We will see you safely to the archive, or we will die trying. Eve wanted to refuse. She'd spent her life alone, trusting no one. But looking at the fierce determination in the Alpha's eyes, at the pack warriors who'd sworn themselves to her protection without hesitation, she realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. What's your name? She asked. Kyle Frostclaw, Highness. Alpha of the Frostclaw pack and guardian of the northern border. Stop calling me Highness, Eve said. My name is Eve. Kyle smiled, a rare expression that softened his harsh features. As you wish, Eve. But know this. You may have been rejected by the Southern King, but the North remembers. The North knows, and the North will follow you into the very jaws of death if you ask it. Thunder rumbled overhead despite the clear sky. The earth trembled slightly beneath their feet. Far to the north, beyond even the Frost Peak Mountains, something ancient stirred in its prison. It felt the awakening of Lycan blood. It felt the last queen drawing closer, and it hungered. Eve looked toward the distant peaks, snow-capped and forbidding, and made a decision that would change everything. Then let's not keep death waiting, she said. We have a world to save. The Frostclaw pack moved through the tundra like ghosts, their white fur blending perfectly with the snow-covered landscape. Eve traveled in her Lycan form, her massive frame cutting through snowdrifts that would have buried a normal wolf. Kyle ran beside her in his wolf form, occasionally glancing up at her with something between reverence and wariness. They'd been traveling for 2 days when the landscape changed. The snow turned black, not the gray-black of dirt mixed with ice, but pure obsidian, as if someone had poured ink across the land. It spread in veins from the north, creeping south like infection through healthy tissue. Where the black snow touched, nothing lived. Trees stood as twisted husks. The ground beneath was frozen solid, permafrost that rejected all warmth. Eve stopped, her massive clawed feet sinking into the corrupted snow. Even through her thick fur, she felt the wrongness of it. This wasn't natural cold. This was absence, the complete void of life, warmth, hope. Kale shifted to human form beside her, his breath misting in the frigid air. This is new? 3 months ago, the black ice only reached to the second ridge. Now it spread 20 miles south. It's accelerating, Eve said, her multi-toned voice rumbling like distant thunder. She shifted as well, standing naked in the freezing wind but feeling no discomfort. Her Lycan blood protected her. Morveth is breaking free. Not breaking, a voice corrected from behind them. Waking. Eve spun, claws extending instinctively. An old woman stood in the snow where no one had been moments before. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, wrapped in furs so thick she looked like a walking pile of pelts. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes milky with cataracts, but when she looked at Eve, those blind eyes seemed to see everything. Kale dropped to one knee immediately. Elder Isolde, forgive us, we didn't sense your approach. Of course you didn't, boy. I'm older than sense itself. The crone shuffled forward, her walking stick tapping against the black ice. Well, well, the last queen finally arrives. Took you long enough. Eve tensed. You know who I am? I know what you are. I know what you carry. I know what you must do. Isolde stopped 3 feet away, tilting her head like a bird examining a particularly interesting worm. I also know you're going to fail. The words hit like a physical blow. What? You heard me, girl. You're going to the Eternal Archive thinking you'll find some ancient ritual to restore the seal, some spell your ancestors used. Isolde's laugh was dry as dead leaves. But the archive won't help you, because the seal was never magic. Eve's heart hammered. Then what was it? Blood, will, sacrifice. Isolde tapped her stick against the ground, and the black ice around it hissed and retreated slightly. Your ancestors didn't seal Morveth with spells and incantations. They sealed it with their very essence. Each Lycan Queen gave a piece of her soul to strengthen the binding. Generation after generation, queen after queen, layering their life force over the prison. That's why the seal weakened, Eve breathed. As the bloodline died out, the layers dissolved. Yes, Isolde nodded. And now you are the last, the final layer. The only thing standing between this world and complete annihilation. Kael rose slowly. Then Eve must perform the ritual, seal Morveth again. She can try. Isolde's blind eyes fixed on Eve. But here's the truth no one wants to tell you, last queen. The ritual requires all the power of the Lycan bloodline, every ounce of strength, every drop of magic. And when it's done, when Morveth is sealed once more, she paused, you'll be human, mortal, powerless. Everything that makes you Lycan will be poured into that seal. The words hung in the frozen air like poison. Eve's voice came out strangled. I'll lose my wolf? My power? You'll lose everything. The transformation will be impossible. You'll age normally, die normally. You'll be exactly what Alpha King Fenric thought you were, wolfless and weak. Isolde's smile was sad. That is the price of being the last queen. Not glory, not power. Sacrifice. No, Moira growled inside Eve's mind. There must be another way. There isn't, Isolde said, as if she'd heard Moira's protest. And deep down, you both know it. Eve's legs gave out. She sank to her knees in the black snow, her mind reeling. She'd just discovered her power, just learned what she was, just begun to understand the strength that flowed through her veins, and now she was being told she had to give it all away. Why? The word came out broken. Why does it have to be this way? Because Morveth is not a creature, not a demon. It is entropy itself, the heat death of the universe given form and hunger. It cannot be killed. It can only be contained, and the only thing strong enough to contain the end of all things is the beginning of all things. Isolde knelt with difficulty, her ancient joints creaking. The Lycan bloodline represents the first shift, the moment life decided to change, to adapt, to become more than it was. That primal force of transformation is the antithesis of Morveth's stagnation. So I'm a battery, Eve said bitterly, a power source to be drained. You are a queen, Isolde corrected sharply, and queens do not whine about the crown's weight. They bear it or they abdicate. Which will you choose? Eve looked up at the old woman, at Kael standing silently nearby, at the black corruption spreading across the land. She thought of the villages to the south, the thousands of wolves who had no idea what was coming, the children who would die screaming if Morveth broke free. She thought of Fenric, the mate who'd rejected her, the king who'd called her worthless, the man whose face still haunted her dreams despite everything. If she performed the ritual, she'd save him, save his kingdom, save everyone. And he would never know, would never understand what she'd sacrificed, would live out his days thinking she was nothing special after all. The unfairness of it made her want to scream. What if I refuse? Eve asked quietly. What if I let Morveth break free? Kael sucked in a sharp breath, but Isolde only nodded, as if she'd expected the question. Then the world ends. Not quickly, not mercifully. Morveth will spread like the black ice, slowly consuming everything. Life will drain from the land inch by inch. Wolves will forget how to shift, Plants will forget how to grow. Eventually, even the stones will forget how to be stones. Everything will simply stop. Isolde stood with a grunt. But you'll keep your power. You'll be the last Lycan, watching as everything else fades to nothing. Is that the legacy you want? Eve closed her eyes. She saw the orphanage where she'd grown up. Matron Griss's cruel face, the other children's mocking laughter, the years of being nothing, having nothing, meaning nothing. She'd been given power for barely a month. And now she had to choose. Keep it and doom the world, or sacrifice it and save everyone who'd ever treated her like garbage. That's not a choice, she whispered. No, Isolde agreed. It's a test, and you're running out of time to pass it. As if to punctuate her words, the ground trembled. A deep, resonant sound echoed from the north. Not quite a roar, not quite a scream. It sounded like the earth itself was crying out in pain. Kale's face went pale. The northern seal. Something's happening at the northern seal. It's cracking, Isolde said calmly. Morveth pushes against its prison. Soon it will push through. How long? Eve demanded. Days. Maybe a week. Isolde turned to face north, her blind eyes somehow seeing what was coming. The Eternal Archive lies beyond the Frostpeak Mountains, in a valley called Shadowmere. There you'll find the Heartstone, the focal point where all the seal's power converges. That's where the ritual must be performed. You're not coming with us? Eve asked. Isolde laughed. I'm 643 years old, girl. I've been waiting here for the last queen to arrive for 2 centuries. My part in this story is done. She reached out with a gnarled hand and touched Eve's face. But I'll give you this much. The ritual requires a catalyst, something of deep emotional power to focus the transformation of Lycan essence into seal-binding force. What kind of catalyst? The bond of true mates. Isolde's smile was knowing. The connection between 2 souls that transcends flesh and choice, a bond that exists whether acknowledged or denied. Eve's blood turned to ice. No. Yes, you'll need the mate bond to complete the ritual, which means you'll need your rejected king. Isolde stepped back. Fate has a cruel sense of humor, doesn't it? Before Eve could respond, the old woman simply vanished, there one moment, gone the next, as if she'd never existed at all. Kale whistled low. The elder only appears once per generation. You're blessed to have met her at all. I don't feel blessed, Eve muttered. She stood, her mind racing. I need Fenric, the male who rejected me, the king who thinks I'm worthless. Then we bring him here. Kale's voice was matter-of-fact. By force, if necessary. He commands the largest army in the north. We can't just kidnap him. Can't we? Kale grinned, showing teeth. We're already outlaws. Might as well commit to it. Despite everything, Eve found herself smiling. Then the smile faded as another thought occurred to her. Fenric thinks I'm a monster, a killer. He sent hunting parties after me. If I go to him now, try to explain, he'll lock you up or kill you on sight, Kyle finished, which is why we don't ask permission. We take what we need. Eve looked at the Frostclaw Alpha, this warrior who'd sworn himself to her service without hesitation. You'd go to war with the Alpha King for me? I'd walk into hell itself if you asked it. Kale's expression was serious. You are the last queen, the old blood. Your survival matters more than kingdoms or kings. He's right, Moira said. We cannot fail because of one male's pride. Then we need a plan, Eve said. A way to get close to Fenric without his entire army descending on us. Kale's grin turned predatory. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. 3 days later, Eve stood at the edge of Silver Peak Castle's territory, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was in human form, wearing simple traveling clothes Kael's pack had provided. Her hair was braided back. Her feet were wrapped in leather boots. She looked like nothing, like no one, just the way Fenric remembered her. The plan was insane. Eve would surrender herself to the castle guards, claim she wanted to confess to the murders she was accused of. They'd take her to Fenric. And once she was close enough, Kael and his pack would create a diversion, a feint attack on the eastern wall, while Eve used her Lycan strength to subdue Fenric and escape with him. Simple, direct, absolutely certain to go wrong in every possible way. This is madness, Moira said for the 100th time. You have a better idea? Eve muttered under her breath. Yes. Kill him. Take his blood by force. It doesn't matter if he's conscious for the ritual. I'm not killing him. Why not? He rejected you, humiliated you, hunted you like an animal, because despite all of that, Eve's traitorous heart still ached when she thought of him. Because the mate bond, supposedly severed, still pulled at her like a fishhook lodged in her chest. Because some stupid, broken part of her still wanted him to see her, really see her, and understand what he'd thrown away. Because I'm not a monster, Eve said quietly. No matter what they think. She stepped out of the tree line and into the open ground before the castle. Immediately, horns blared. Guards appeared on the walls, arrows knocked and aimed. Eve raised her hands, palms out. I'm here to surrender. A captain appeared at the wall's edge, his face suspicious. State your name. Eve Ashenmore, the one you're hunting. She kept her hands raised. I want to speak to Alpha King Fenric. I'll confess everything. Just let me see him. The captain disappeared. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Eve stood perfectly still, aware of the dozens of archers tracking her every breath. Finally, the main gate opened. Fenric Drathmore strode out, flanked by 20 guards. He wore full combat gear, leather and steel, silver blades at his hips. His silver-white hair was tied back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. Those storm-gray eyes locked onto Eve with an intensity that made her knees weak. He stopped 20 feet away. Eve Ashenmore. Fenric's voice was cold. You've been accused of murder. Multiple counts. The deaths of farmers, hunters, guards. I know what I'm accused of, Eve said. Her voice didn't shake. Small victory. I didn't kill any farmers. But the guards, they attacked me first. I defended myself. Defended yourself how? You're wolfless, human. Fenric took a step closer. How does a powerless orphan kill trained royal guards? This was it, the moment of truth. Eve met his eyes. Because I lied. I'm not powerless. I'm not wolfless. The change ripped through her before she could finish the sentence. Bones snapped. Muscles expanded. Silver-black fur erupted across her skin. In 3 seconds, Eve transformed from a small, unremarkable woman into a 12-foot Lycan nightmare. The guard shouted in alarm. Arrows flew. Eve's massive hand swept out, batting the projectiles aside like insects. Fenric stumbled backward, his face draining of color. What in the... Lycan, Eve finished, her voice a multi-toned growl. I'm the last Lycan Queen, and I need your help. Then Kael's howl split the air, the signal. An explosion rocked the eastern wall as the Frostclaw pack launched their diversion. Guards ran toward the sound, chaos erupting across the courtyard. Eve moved. She closed the distance to Fenric in one massive leap, her clawed hand closing around his waist. He drew his silver blade and drove it into her shoulder. Pain exploded through her nerves, but Eve didn't let go. I'm sorry, she growled, but the world is ending, and you're the only one who can help me stop it. She launched skyward, her powerful legs carrying them both 30 feet into the air. Fenric shouted in rage and fear, still fighting, still stabbing with that silver blade. Eve hit the ground running. Behind her, Silver Peak erupted into chaos. Horns blaring, wolves howling, guards scrambling to respond to the two-pronged assault. But Eve was already gone, carrying the Alpha King into the frozen north, carrying him toward his destiny, whether he wanted it or not. Fenric fought like a demon the entire journey. He stabbed Eve 14 times with his silver blade before she finally wrenched it from his grasp and threw it into a snowbank. He shifted into his wolf form, massive and silver-white, with fangs like daggers, and bit chunks from her arms and legs. Eve bore it all without dropping him. Finally, after an hour of running, she reached the rendezvous point where Kael and his pack waited. Eve dropped Fenric into the snow and shifted back to human form, gasping with pain and exhaustion. Blood poured from a dozen wounds. Her shoulder, where the silver blade had pierced deepest, burned like acid. Fenric shifted as well, standing naked and furious in the snow. His eyes blazed with rage. "You dare!" he started. "Silence!" Kael's command cracked like a whip. The Frostclaw Alpha stepped forward, and even Fenric, ruler of the largest kingdom in the north, felt the weight of Kael's dominance. You will listen to what the last queen has to say, or I will break both your legs and drag you north unconscious." Fenric's gaze snapped to Eve. She stood hunched over, blood dripping onto white snow, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Last queen!" Fenric's voice was dangerous. "What insanity is this?" "Not insanity," Eve forced out. "Truth. I'm Lycan, the last of the moon-born bloodline. And there's something coming, something that will destroy everything if I don't stop it." "Lies. Lycans are myths. Like the 12-foot monster you just saw transform from a wolfless orphan?" Eve straightened with effort. "Open your eyes, Fenric. The world is bigger and stranger than your kingdom, and it's dying." She gestured to the north, where the sky had taken on a sickly gray-green color. "Morveth is waking. An ancient entity that my ancestors sealed beneath the earth. The seal is breaking. In days, maybe less, it will break free. And when it does, everything ends." Fenric stared at her. She could see him processing, his tactical mind working through the implications. "Let's say I believe you," he said slowly. "What does this have to do with me?" "The ritual to restore the seal requires a catalyst, the bond between true mates." Eve's voice cracked. "You rejected me, severed the bond, but the bond exists whether we acknowledge it or not. I need you to complete the ritual." Fenric laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You kidnapped me, assaulted my guards, attacked my castle, and now you want me to help you?" "I want you to help save your people," Eve shot back. "This isn't about us. It's about every wolf, every human, every living thing in this world. Morveth doesn't care about kingdoms or borders. It will consume everything." "Prove it." Eve blinked. "What?" "Prove this entity exists. Prove the seal is breaking. Prove any of what you're saying is real." Fenric crossed his arms. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks like an elaborate revenge plot from a rejected mate who lost her mind." The words stung more than any silver blade. Eve looked at Kael, who nodded grimly. "Show him. Take him to the black ice." So they traveled north again, this time with Fenric walking under his own power, surrounded by Frostclaw warriors who'd kill him if he tried to escape. Eve stayed in human form, healing slowly from her wounds. She and Fenric didn't speak. After 3 hours, they reached the edge of the black ice. Fenric stopped dead, his face going pale. The corruption had spread another 5 miles since Eve had last seen it. What had been isolated veins of black snow was now a solid mass, a wall of absolute darkness that stretched from horizon to horizon. The temperature dropped 30 degrees just approaching it. The air itself seemed wrong, as if reality was thinner here. And in the distance, deep beneath the black ice, something moved. Something massive. "What?" Fenric's voice was barely a whisper. "What is that?" "That's Morveth," Eve said, "or the edge of it. The actual entity is still mostly sealed. But it's pushing up, testing the boundaries. Soon it will break through." As if responding to her words, the ice cracked. A fissure split open, and from it emerged a tendril, black as midnight, writhing like a living thing. It reached into the air, questing, searching. Where it touched the ground, everything died. Grass withered to ash, stones crumbled to dust. The very essence of matter seemed to forget how to exist. Fenric took an involuntary step backward. "This is real. This is actually real." "Yes." Eve moved to stand beside him, and for a moment they were just two people facing the end of the world together. "And I'm the only one who can stop it. But I need you. The ritual won't work without the mate bond." Fenric turned to her slowly. "You said the ritual requires a catalyst. What else does it require?" Eve's throat tightened. She'd hoped to avoid this conversation. "It requires all the power of the Lycan bloodline, every ounce of magic, every drop of strength." "Meaning?" "Meaning when it's done, I'll be human, mortal, wolfless." The words tasted like ash. "Everything that makes me Lycan will be poured into resealing Morveth. I'll lose it all." Fenric's expression was unreadable. "You'd give up your power? Your wolf?" "I don't have a choice." "There's always a choice. Not when the alternative is watching the world die." Eve's hands clenched into fists. "I know you hate me. I know you think I'm worthless. But those people in your kingdom, the ones you swore to protect, They don't deserve this. So I'm asking you, Fenric, not as your rejected mate, not as the last queen, just as someone trying to do the right thing. She met his eyes. Will you help me? The tendril of darkness quested closer, drawn by their living warmth. Kyle and his wolves backed away, instinct overriding courage. Fenric stared at the approaching corruption, then at Eve. Something shifted in his expression, not quite acceptance, but acknowledgement. I'll help you, he said, on one condition. Eve's heart leaped. Name it. After this is done, after you've performed your ritual and lost your power, after you're human and mortal and exactly what I thought you were, Fenric stepped closer, and his scent washed over her, pine and steel and winter storms. You leave. You disappear. You never come near my kingdom again. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Eve had known she'd lose her power. She'd accepted that sacrifice. But she hadn't realized until this moment that she'd been harboring a tiny, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, after Fenric saw what she was willing to give up, after he understood what she truly was, he might, what? Apologize? Take back the rejection? Love her? How pathetically foolish. Deal, Eve said, her voice hollow. Save the world, then disappear. I can do that. Then let's move, Fenric said briskly. All business now. How far to this eternal archive? 3 days' hard march, Kael answered. Through the Frostpeak Mountains and into Shadowmere Valley. Then we're wasting time. Fenric turned to head north, then paused. He didn't look back at Eve as he spoke. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about the rejection. You deserve better than that. It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever get from him. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Eve transformed into her Lycan form and fell into step beside the Alpha King, heading toward the mountains where her destiny waited. Behind them, the black ice spread further south. The tendril withdrew back into the depths, but they could all feel it, Morveth's attention now focused on the small group of wolves traveling north. The entity knew what they planned, and it was hungry. In 2 days, they would reach the Eternal Archive. In 3, they would perform the ritual. Eve would pour every ounce of her Lycan essence into resealing the prison, burning away her power to save a world that had never wanted her. And Fenric Drathmore, the mate who'd rejected her, the king who'd broken her heart, would walk away afterward without looking back. Sometimes the right choice was also the cruelest one. Eve was beginning to understand exactly what it meant to be a queen. It meant sacrifice. It meant pain. It meant doing what was necessary, no matter the cost to yourself. The twin moons rose over the frozen wasteland, bearing silent witness to a small group of wolves marching toward either salvation or doom. Eve Ashenmore, the last Lycan Queen, walked among them. And deep beneath the earth, Morveth stirred, waiting. The Frostpeak Mountains rose before them like the spine of some ancient sleeping god, jagged peaks that pierced the clouds, their slopes covered in ice so old it had turned blue. The wind here didn't howl, it screamed, carrying voices that might have been the mountain's memory or might have been nothing at all. Eve led the way in her Lycan form, her massive body breaking trail through snow that reached her chest. Behind her came Fenric in his wolf form, silver-white and sleek, moving with the fluid grace of a predator born to this frozen hell. Kyle and his Frostclaw warriors flanked them, 12 wolves against a mountain range that had killed stronger packs. They'd been climbing for 2 days, 2 days of brutal cold that froze breath in lungs and turned exposed skin black with frostbite. 2 days of treacherous paths where one wrong step meant a 1,000-foot fall onto jagged rocks. 2 days of near silence because speaking required energy they couldn't spare. But Eve felt it now, the pull. Something ahead was calling to her blood, resonating with the Lycan essence that burned in her veins, the Eternal Archive, the place where her answers waited. The place where she would lose everything. You could turn back, Moira whispered. The Lycan spirit had grown quieter as they climbed, as if the mountains themselves pressed down on her. Let the world burn. Keep your power. Survive. No, Eve growled aloud, her breath misting in massive clouds. Fenric's wolf ears twitched, but he didn't break stride. They'd barely spoken since the black ice. An uneasy truce existed between them. Allies by necessity, strangers by choice. Eve hated how much she still noticed him, the way he moved, the scent of him on the wind, the occasional glances he threw her way when he thought she wasn't looking, his storm-gray eyes unreadable. The mate bond, supposedly severed, still pulsed between them like a wound that refused to heal. On the third day, they reached the pass. Eve crested the ridge and stopped dead. The others scrambled up behind her and went silent. Shadowmere Valley spread below them like a scar carved into the world. It was a bowl of stone and ice, perhaps 5 miles across, ringed by peaks so tall they disappeared into clouds. But it was what lay at the valley's center that stole the breath from their lungs. The Eternal Archive. It rose from the valley floor like a monument to a civilization that had mastered both beauty and terror. Black stone pillars, the width of ancient oak, supported a structure that seemed to grow from the mountain itself, part temple, part fortress, part something with no name in the modern tongue. Glyphs covered every surface, glowing with a faint silver light that pulsed like a heartbeat, and surrounding it, for 1/2 mile in every direction, was pure black ice. The corruption had reached the archive. "No," Eve breathed. "No, no, no. It's worse than we thought," Kyle said, shifting to human form despite the brutal cold. His weathered face was grim. The archive was supposed to be protected, warded by the old magic. "The wards are failing," Fenric's voice came from beside them. He'd shifted as well, standing naked in the snow, seemingly unbothered by the cold. His eyes scanned the valley with a tactician's precision. "Look at the pillars. The light is flickering. Whatever power protected this place is dying." Eve shifted to human form, her body steaming in the frigid air. "We're running out of time." "Then we move now." Fenric's voice was flat, all business. "What's the approach?" "Straight through the corruption," Eve said. "There's no other way to reach the archive." "The black ice killed wolves just by touching them," one of Kael's warriors protested. "How do we cross 1/2 mile of it?" Eve looked down at her hands, pale, small, unremarkable. In 2 days, maybe less, these hands would be all she had. No claws, no strength, no power, just flesh and bone and the slow march toward death. "I'll carry you," she said. "In my Lycan form, I'm strong enough to resist the corruption. For a while." "For how long?" Fenric asked. "Long enough." It was a lie, but a necessary one. Eve had felt the black ice's touch before. It didn't just kill the body, it killed hope, will, the very desire to exist. Walking through it for 1/2 mile would be torture beyond imagination. But she was the last queen, and queens endured. The descent into Shadowmere Valley took an hour. With each step, the temperature dropped further. The air grew thick, difficult to breathe, as if reality itself was heavier here. By the time they reached the valley floor, even Kael's hardened warriors were stumbling. The edge of the black ice lay before them. Up close, it was even more horrific. The corruption wasn't just dark, it was absence. Looking at it felt like staring into the void between stars, the nothing that existed before creation and would exist after the last light died. And from deep within it, something looked back. Fenric stepped forward, reaching out tentatively. Eve's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. "Don't," she said, "not even for a second. It'll take you." He met her eyes, and for a moment something passed between them. Not quite understanding, but acknowledgement. He nodded and stepped back. Eve transformed. The shift came easier now, almost natural. In 3 seconds, she stood at her full 12-foot height, silver-black fur rippling in the unnatural wind that howled across the ice. "Climb on," she said, her multi-toned voice carrying easily over the wind. "Hold tight. Don't let go for any reason." Kael's wolves shifted to their animal forms and scrambled onto her back, gripping her thick fur. Fenric hesitated, his pride clearly warring with necessity. Then he shifted as well, a magnificent silver-white wolf, and leaped onto her shoulders. His weight settled against her, and Eve felt the mate bond flare. Even in their wolf forms, even with everything broken between them, the connection hummed like a live wire. "Focus," Moira commanded. "The corruption will use your emotions against you." Eve took a breath and stepped onto the black ice. Pain exploded through her body. It wasn't physical pain, though that came too, a burning cold that seared through her paws. This was deeper, existential. The black ice reached into her mind, into her soul, and whispered truths she'd spent her life trying to forget. "You are nothing," it hissed. "Worthless. Unloved. Rejected." Eve gritted her massive teeth and took another step. The orphan no one wanted, the wolf with no pack. The mate thrown away like garbage. Another step. The wolves on her back whimpered. Fenric's claws dug into her shoulders, whether in pain or encouragement she couldn't tell. "You will fail. You will lose your power and become nothing again." And he will walk away. They all will. "Shut up," Eve snarled. She forced her legs to move, one massive paw after another, pushing through the corruption that tried to drag her down into eternal nothing. The distance to the archive seemed impossible. What should have been a 15-minute walk stretched into eternity. Each step took all her will. The black ice climbed her legs, trying to pull her under. The corruption seeped into her wounds, into the spaces between her thoughts. "You could stop, lie down, let it take you. Isn't that what you want? To finally stop fighting?" For a moment, just a moment, Eve considered it. How easy it would be to simply fall, to let the black ice consume her, to end the pain, the struggle, the endless battle against a world that had never wanted her anyway. Then Fenric's voice cut through the darkness. "Keep moving." It wasn't kind, wasn't encouraging, just a flat command devoid of emotion. And somehow, that was exactly what Eve needed. She snarled and pushed forward with renewed fury. The black ice shrieked, an actual sound, like tearing metal, as she forced her way through it. The corruption tried to hold her, to drag her down, but Eve's Lycan strength was greater. For now. Step by agonizing step, she crossed the corrupted ground. The wolves on her back fell silent, conserving energy. The wind howled. The black ice whispered its poison, and Eve walked. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, her massive paw touched clean stone. The steps of the eternal archive. She'd made it. Eve collapsed. The wolves tumbled from her back as her legs gave out. She shifted involuntarily back to human form, her body too exhausted to maintain the transformation. Blood poured from her paws, now human feet, where the corruption had burned through skin and muscle. Her breath came in ragged gasps. "Eve!" Kael was at her side immediately, his weathered face creased with worry. "Stay with us." "I'm fine," she lied, trying to sit up. Her head spun. The world tilted. Fenric shifted to human form and crouched beside her. For a moment, his mask of cold indifference cracked, and she saw genuine concern flash across his face. "You're bleeding," he said. "It'll heal." "Will it?" His eyes dropped to her feet, where the flesh was blackened and peeling. "That's not normal damage." He was right. The black ice didn't just wound, it corrupted. The damage spread like infection up her ankles, eating away at healthy tissue. "The corruption is in your blood now," Moira said weakly. "We need to reach the Heartstone quickly, before it reaches your heart." "How long?" Eve whispered. "Hours. Maybe less." Eve struggled to her feet, ignoring the screaming pain. "Then we move. Now." The massive doors of the Eternal Archive stood before them, 30 feet tall, made of black stone inlaid with silver that pulsed with fading light. Glyphs covered every inch, writing in a language Eve didn't recognize, but somehow understood. "Here lies the knowledge of the first shift. Enter, ye who carry the blood of queens, and know thy purpose." Eve placed her hand on the door. The glyphs flared brilliant silver. Power surged through her, recognizing her bloodline, her essence. The doors groaned, a sound like the earth itself waking, and swung inward. Cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of ancient stone and older magic. The Frostclaw warriors hesitated at the threshold. Even Kael looked uneasy. "The archive was built by your ancestors," he said to Eve. "It may not welcome wolves of lesser blood." "Then stay here," Eve said. "Guard the entrance. Make sure nothing follows us in." Kael nodded, relief flickering across his face. "We'll hold this position. Return victorious, last queen." Eve turned to Fenric. "You need to come. The ritual requires both of us." He met her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. Then he nodded curtly and stepped through the doorway. Eve followed. The doors swung shut behind them with a sound like thunder, sealing them inside. The interior of the Eternal Archive was vast beyond reason. The entrance hall stretched upward into darkness, supported by pillars that seemed to be carved from single pieces of mountain. The same silver glyphs covered every surface, providing the only light, a cold, steady glow that cast no shadows. But it was the murals that stole Eve's breath. They covered the walls from floor to ceiling, images of creatures like Eve's Lycan form, but dozens of them. Hundreds. An entire civilization of beings that walked upright, commanded magic, and stood as guardians between the mortal world and something else. Something dark that lurked at the edges of every image, never quite in focus, but always present. Your ancestors, Fenric said quietly. He'd stopped before one mural that showed a female Lycan, crowned in silver, eyes blazing with power, standing over a chasm from which black tendrils emerged. Her clawed hand was raised, and from it poured light that drove back the darkness. The first queen, Eve breathed. She was the one who initially sealed Morveth. And you're the last. Fenric turned to her. No pressure. Despite everything, Eve almost smiled. Your attempt at humor needs work. I'm an alpha king. Humor isn't in the job description. They moved deeper into the archive. The corridors branched and twisted, but Eve felt the pull, that same resonance in her blood, guiding her forward. They passed chambers filled with ancient texts, artifacts of worked stone and metal, weapons that hummed with dormant power. And in every chamber, more murals, more history. Eve saw the rise of the Lycan Queens, the wars they fought against creatures that no longer existed, the peace they brokered between the first wolves and the first humans, the slow decline as the bloodline thinned, as queens died without heirs, as the power faded generation by generation, the story of a people who had sacrificed everything to protect a world that would forget they ever existed. They gave up so much, Eve whispered. And for what? To be erased from history? To become myths and legends? To be forgotten by everyone except those who needed to remember. Fenric stood before a mural showing the last gathering of queens, 9 females, their faces solemn, their eyes knowing. They knew what they were doing, knew the cost, and they did it anyway. Because they had no choice. Because they were willing to pay the price that others weren't. Fenric turned to her, and his expression was unreadable. You're angry. At me. At the world. At fate. I can feel it radiating off you. Of course I'm angry, Eve snapped. I'm about to give up everything to save people who treated me like garbage, who laughed at me, who rejected me. She met his eyes. Wouldn't you be angry? Yes, Fenric said simply. I would be furious. The honesty caught her off guard. But anger won't help you complete the ritual, he continued. And if you fail because you're too busy nursing your rage, then everyone dies, including the ones who were kind to you, the children who never hurt anyone, the innocents who don't deserve what's coming. Eve's hands clenched into fists. You don't get to lecture me about duty. You rejected your fated mate because she wasn't powerful enough for your standards. You put pride before the mate bond. So don't stand there and tell me about sacrifice. Fenric's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he'd lash out, defend himself, make excuses. Instead, he said, You're right. Eve blinked. What? You're right. I was arrogant, prideful, stupid. Fenric ran a hand through his silver hair. I saw a wolfless orphan and assumed I knew everything about you. I rejected you without even trying to understand who you were, and that was wrong. The admission hung in the air between them. Why? Eve's voice cracked. Why did you reject me so easily? Fenric looked away, his jaw working. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Because I was afraid. Afraid? You're the Alpha King. What could you possibly... I was afraid of being weak. The words came out harsh. My father chose a mate for love. She was beautiful, kind, perfect in every way. And when she died giving birth to me, it destroyed him. He became a shell, ruled through advisors because he couldn't bear to make decisions without her. When I took the throne at 16, I swore I'd never let emotion compromise my judgment. I'd choose a queen who was an asset, a partner in power, not passion. Eve's heart hammered. So when the mate bond chose me, I panicked, Fenric admitted. Because the moment I saw you, the moment the bond snapped into place, I felt it, that pull, that need. And I knew if I let myself care about you, if I let the bond take hold, I'd become my father. Weak, controlled by emotion instead of logic. So you rejected me to protect yourself? Yes. Fenric's hands clenched at his sides. And I've regretted it every day since, because the bond didn't sever. It's still there, pulling at me, making me… He cut himself off. Making you what? Eve pressed. Fenric finally met her eyes, and what she saw there stole her breath. Pain, longing, regret. Making me realize I rejected the most important person I'll ever meet, he said quietly, and by the time I understood that, it was too late. Before Eve could respond, the corruption in her feet flared with pain. She gasped and stumbled. Fenric caught her instantly, his arms strong and steady. How bad? He asked. Bad, we need to hurry. They moved faster, Eve leaning on Fenric when the pain became too much. The irony wasn't lost on her, the mate who'd rejected her now supporting her as they walked toward her sacrifice. Finally, they reached it. The heart chamber. It was a perfect circle, 50 feet across, carved from living stone. At the center stood a pillar of crystal that pulsed with silver light, the heartstone, the focal point of the seal. And surrounding it, carved into the floor, was a ritual circle inscribed with thousands of glyphs. Eve recognized them instinctively. Instructions. The steps of the ritual. This is it, she breathed. Fenric helped her to the edge of the circle. What do we do? Eve read the glyphs, and with each line her heart sank further. The last queen must stand at the heartstone. The true mate must stand at the circle's edge. Blood must be given. Will must be spoken. The bond must be acknowledged, fully, completely, without reservation. Only then can the Lycan essence flow from queen to stone, from stone to seal. The bond must be acknowledged, Eve read aloud. Both parties must accept it, freely, without coercion. Fenric went very still. The ritual won't work if I'm here against my will. No, Eve laughed bitterly. The magic requires truth. You have to want the bond. Want me. And we both know that's never going to happen. Eve, it's fine. She pulled away from him, standing on her own despite the pain. I'll figure something else out. Maybe there's an alternative, some other way to power the ritual. There isn't. Fenric's voice was flat. You know there isn't. The glyphs are clear. Then I'll find a way to make it work without your cooperation. I accept it. Eve's words died in her throat. She turned slowly. What? Fenric stood at the circle's edge, his storm-gray eyes locked on hers. I accept the bond. I accept you as my mate. Fully. Freely. Without reservation. You're lying. You have to be lying. You rejected me. And I was wrong. Fenric took a step forward. Eve, I've had 3 weeks to think about what I did. 3 weeks of watching you become exactly what I claimed you could never be. Strong, powerful, magnificent. 3 weeks of the mate bond clawing at my insides, demanding I find you, protect you, claim you. The bond is severed. You said the words meant nothing. Fenric's voice rose. You think I don't feel it? Every moment pulling at me like a rope tied around my chest? You think I don't wake up reaching for someone who isn't there? The bond exists whether I want it to or not. And I'm done fighting it. Eve's eyes burned. You don't mean that. You're just saying what I need to hear to complete the ritual. Then test me. Fenric spread his arms. The magic requires truth, right? So ask me. Anything, and I'll answer truthfully. Eve's mind raced. She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so desperately it terrified her. But she'd been hurt too many times to trust easily. Why did you really reject me? She asked. Because I was afraid of loving you, Fenric said without hesitation. Because I looked at you and felt something I'd never felt before. Not just attraction, but recognition. Like you were the missing piece I didn't know I'd been searching for. And that terrified me. When did you realize you were wrong? The moment you laughed. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Everyone expected you to break, to beg, to collapse. And instead you laughed in my face and walked away like a queen dismissing a peasant. That was when I knew I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Eve's breath caught. What do you want from me? Everything. Fenric closed the distance between them. Your trust, your respect, your forgiveness if you can give it. And when this is over, when you're human and mortal and exactly what I once thought you were. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek. I want you to stay, not as my queen, not as an asset or a partner in power, but as my mate, the person I choose over and over until the day I die. Tears streamed down Eve's face. I'm about to lose everything, my power, my wolf, all of it. I know. You'll be bound to a human, weak, powerless. I don't care. Yes, you do. Eve pulled back. You care about strength, about power, about having a mate who's worthy of an alpha king. I care about you, Fenric's shout echoed through the chamber. Don't you understand? I don't want a powerful mate. I don't want an asset. I want Eve Ashenmore, stubborn, fierce, brave beyond reason, stupid enough to sacrifice herself for a world that doesn't deserve her. That's who I want. That's who I choose. The heartstone flared brilliant silver, responding to his words. The truth of them. Eve's legs gave out. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Fenric dropped beside her, his hands on her shoulders. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said quietly. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be undone. But Eve, if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I choose you. Not out of duty, not because of magic, but because you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Eve looked up at him through her tears. I hate you. I know. You broke my heart. I know. And I'm still going to save your kingdom, because it's the right thing to do. I know that too. Fenric's thumb brushed away her tears. Because you're a queen, and queens do what must be done. Eve closed her eyes. The corruption had spread to her knees now. She could feel it climbing, eating away at her Lycan essence. Soon it would reach her heart. And when it did, she'd be too weak to perform the ritual. It was now or never. Okay, she whispered. Let's save the world. She stood, and Fenric helped her to the heartstone. Eve placed her hands on the crystal, and it blazed with light that filled the chamber. The ritual circle activated, glyphs burning silver as ancient magic stirred to life. Fenric took his position at the circle's edge. Eve began to speak the words carved into the stone, words in the old language, power syllables that resonated with the fundamental forces of creation. With each word, she felt her Lycan essence being drawn out. It poured from her body like water from a cup, flowing into the heartstone, from the heartstone into the glyphs, from the glyphs into the earth itself. The pain was indescribable. It felt like being unmade. Every cell in her body screamed as the power that had transformed her, that had made her magnificent, was ripped away. But she didn't stop. The chamber shook. The mountains themselves trembled. And far to the north, deep beneath the black ice, Morveth shrieked as new bindings formed around its prison, stronger than before, layered with the essence of the last queen. Eve's Lycan form flickered and faded. Her silver-black fur receded. Her massive frame shrank. Her claws became fingers. No, Moira cried. Eve, stop! You'll lose me. I know, Eve sobbed. I'm sorry. You're stronger than this. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Goodbye, Moira. Thank you for everything. Moira's presence faded like smoke, taking with her the strength, the power, the connection to something ancient and magnificent. Eve collapsed. Fenric caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. She looked up at him with purely human eyes, brown now, no trace of gold, and managed a weak smile. Did it work? She whispered. The heartstone pulsed once, twice, 3 times, then went dark. And in the silence that followed, they felt it, the seal, restored. Stronger than it had been in centuries. The corruption stopped spreading. The black ice began slowly to recede. It worked, Fenric said, his voice rough. You did it. Eve's eyes closed. She felt so weak, so small. Human in truth now, mortal and fragile. Everything she'd feared being, but alive. And in Fenric's arms. Take me home, she breathed. I will, Fenric promised. I'll take you home, and I'll never let you go again. The last thing Eve heard before darkness claimed her was Fenric's voice, rough with emotion she'd never heard from him before. My queen, my mate, my Eve. And for the first time in her life, Eve Ashenmore felt wanted. The world had been saved. The last queen had fulfilled her purpose. And against all odds, against every expectation, she'd found what she'd been searching for her entire life. Not power, not recognition, but love. Eve woke to warmth. After weeks of frozen mountains and corrupted ice, after the soul-deep cold of the black corruption eating through her body, the simple sensation of being warm felt like a miracle. She lay perfectly still, eyes closed, cataloging sensations. Soft furs beneath her, the crackle of a fire, the scent of pine smoke and something else. Clean, masculine, familiar. Fenric. Her eyes opened slowly. She was in a tent, massive and well-appointed, clearly meant for royalty on campaign. Furs piled around her. A brazier glowed in the corner, radiating blessed heat. And sitting beside her, his back against a traveling chest, was the Alpha King. He'd fallen asleep in his vigil, his head tilted back, silver hair falling across his face. Even in sleep, he looked fierce, all sharp angles and controlled power. But there were dark circles under his eyes, stress lines around his mouth. He'd been worried about her. Eve tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her body. Not the searing agony of corruption, but the deep ache of muscles pushed beyond their limits. She gasped, and Fenric's eyes snapped open instantly. "Don't move!" He was at her side in a heartbeat, his hands gentle on her shoulders, easing her back down. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your body needs rest." 3 days? Eve's voice came out raspy. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Fenric reached for a water skin and helped her drink. The water was cold and clean, the best thing she'd ever tasted. When she'd had enough, he set it aside and settled back, watching her with those storm-gray eyes. "We're back at the valley's edge," he said. "Kael and his pack held the archive entrance the entire time we were inside. When I carried you out," he paused. "They knelt, every one of them. Called you the Savior Queen." Eve laughed weakly. "I'm not a queen anymore. I'm just human now." "You'll always be a queen." Fenric's voice was firm. "Power doesn't make royalty. Choice does. Sacrifice does. You gave up everything to save people who didn't deserve you. That makes you more of a queen than any crown ever could." Tears pricked Eve's eyes. She blinked them back. "The seal. Did it hold?" "Yes, the black ice is receding, slowly but steadily. Scouts report that the corruption has pulled back almost 10 miles in 3 days. The land is healing." Fenric's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers. "You saved us all, Eve. The North, the South, every living thing." "Good." Eve closed her eyes briefly. "Then it was worth it." "Was it?" Fenric's voice was quiet. "You lost so much." Eve looked down at her hands, small, pale, purely human. No claws, no strength beyond what a mortal woman possessed. She concentrated, trying to feel Moira's presence, that constant companion who'd guided her through her transformation. Nothing, just silence where the Lycan spirit had once dwelled. "I lost my power," Eve said softly. "My wolf. My connection to something ancient and magnificent. But I gained something too." "What?" She met his eyes. "The knowledge that I matter, that my life had purpose, that I made a choice that saved the world." Her hand squeezed his. "And maybe I gained you, if your pretty words in the heart chamber weren't just for the ritual." Fenric's jaw tightened. Every word was true. "I accept the mate bond, Eve. I accept you. Not the Lycan Queen. Not the powerful shifter. Just you. Eve Ashenmore, stubborn and brave and far too good for a fool like me." "You rejected me," Eve whispered. "In front of your entire kingdom, called me worthless." "I know. You humiliated me, broke my heart." "I know. People will talk, they'll say you're weak for choosing a human mate. They'll question your judgment, your strength." "Let them talk." Fenric leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "I've spent my life ruling by fear and power, making choices based on logic instead of heart. And where did it get me? 3 weeks of hell watching you walk away, knowing I'd thrown away the most precious gift I'd ever been given." "Fenric, I love you." The words fell between them like stones into still water. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first moment when you laughed at my rejection. Maybe when I saw you transform into something magnificent. Maybe when you walked through the black ice, carrying my wolves on your back, refusing to break. But I love you, Eve, and I'll stand before my entire kingdom and tell them that. I'll abdicate the throne if I have to. Eve kissed him. It wasn't graceful or practiced. She was too weak to move properly, and she'd never kissed anyone before in her life. But she pressed her lips to his, cutting off his spiral of words, and poured everything she couldn't say into that contact. When they finally broke apart, Fenric was smiling, a real smile, not the cold mask he usually wore. "Does that mean you forgive me?" he asked. "It means I'm willing to try," Eve said. "But Fenric, I need you to understand. I'm not the same person I was before. I'm not the powerful Lycan who could tear through armies. I'm just me, human, mortal. I'll age. I'll die. I can't give you the strong heirs you wanted. I can't. I don't care about heirs. I don't care about power." Fenric's hand cupped her face. "I care about waking up next to you, seeing you smile, hearing you laugh, that same cold, fierce laugh that haunted my dreams. I care about you, Eve, just you. You say that now, but when the council pressures you, when the other alphas question your choice, then I'll tell them all to go to hell." Fenric's smile turned sharp. "I'm the Alpha King. I've crushed rebellions and executed traitors. If anyone has a problem with my mate, they can take it up with me personally." Despite everything, Eve laughed. "You're insane." "Probably. You make me insane." He sobered. "But Eve, I need you to know something. The bond, it's still there. I can feel it. Can you?" Eve concentrated. Without her Lycan senses, everything felt muted. But deep in her chest, in the hollow place where Moira's presence had once been, she felt it. A warmth, a pull, a connection to Fenric that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with choice. "Yes," she breathed. "I feel it." "The mate bond transcends power," Fenric said. "It exists between souls, not wolves. You're still my mate. You'll always be my mate." The tent flap opened and Kyle ducked inside. The Frostclaw. Alpha's weathered face brightened when he saw Eve awake. "Last queen," he said, dropping to one knee. "It's good to see you conscious." "I'm not a queen anymore, Kale. I'm just Eve." "You'll always be our queen." Kale's voice was firm. "The North doesn't forget. Word has already spread. The last Lycan Queen sacrificed her power to seal Morveth. Songs are being written, shrines are being built. Your name will echo through history." Eve's stomach twisted. "I didn't do it for glory." "Which is exactly why you deserve it." Kale stood. "But that's not why I'm here. Alpha King, there are envoys from Silver Peak at the valley's edge. Your beta, Corvus, leads them. He demands to speak with you immediately." Fenric's expression hardened. "How many?" 50 warriors. Fully armed." Kale's eyes narrowed. "They claim they're here to escort you home safely, but their formation suggests they're prepared for conflict." "Corvus never trusted Eve," Fenric said. "And now that I've been gone for a week, missing and presumed kidnapped?" He stood. "He's probably planning to arrest her for treason." "Let him try." Kale's hand moved to his blade. "My pack stands with Eve. We'll fight your entire army if we have to." "No." Eve forced herself to sit up, ignoring the pain. "No more fighting. No more bloodshed. I'll face them." "Eve, you're too weak," Fenric started. "I'm strong enough to stand. I'm strong enough to speak." Eve swung her legs over the side of the bed, her muscles screaming in protest. "And I'm strong enough to face whatever comes next. Help me up." Fenric looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Eve's expression stopped him. He helped her stand, his arm around her waist supporting her weight. Together they walked out of the tent. The Frostclaw camp had been set up at the valley's edge, a defensible position with good sightlines. Kyle's warriors, 20 strong, stood ready, and facing them across 50 yards of snow-covered ground were Fenric's royal guards. Corvus stood at their head, a massive wolf in human form, dark-haired and scarred, with eyes like chips of ice. When he saw Fenric emerge, relief flashed across his face. Then he saw Eve, and his expression hardened. "My king," Corvus called out. "Thank the moon you're alive. We feared the worst when you disappeared." I wasn't kidnapped, Corvus. I went willingly. Fenric's voice carried clearly across the snow. Eve Ashenmore needed my help to save the North from an ancient threat, and we succeeded. The threat you speak of, Morveth, the Black Ice, we've seen it recede. Corvus's eyes never left Eve. But at what cost? The reports say you spent days alone with this female, that you entered the Eternal Archive together, that you performed some kind of ritual. We restored the seal that kept Morveth contained, Fenric said. Eve sacrificed her Lycan power to save us all. Convenient story. Corvus took a step forward. A wolfless orphan suddenly claims to be a Lycan Queen, kidnaps the Alpha King, forces him to participate in some ritual, and now she stands there powerless again, claiming to be a savior. Watch your tone. Fenric's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. You're speaking about my mate. The words fell like a bomb. Every guard went still. Corvus's face drained of color. Your mate? He said carefully. My king, you rejected her, publicly. We all witnessed it. I was wrong. Fenric's arm tightened around Eve's waist. I rejected the most important person I'll ever meet because I was afraid. Because I let pride override sense. But I'm not afraid anymore, and I'm not going to hide what she means to me. She's human, another guard spoke up, one of the council members who'd traveled with Corvus. Wolfless. She can't bear you proper heirs. She can't strengthen the Drathmore bloodline. My king, be reasonable. Reasonable? Fenric's laugh was cold. You want me to be reasonable? Fine. Let me explain something to all of you, very clearly. Eve Ashenmore walked through corrupted ice that would have killed any of you in seconds. She carried my wolves on her back while the darkness ate at her soul. She stood at the Heartstone and poured every ounce of her power into a seal that will protect this world for another 1,000 years. She did all of that knowing she'd lose everything, her strength, her wolf, her very identity. And she did it anyway. His voice rose. So don't you dare stand there and tell me she's not worthy. Don't you dare question my choice. Because that woman has more courage in her smallest finger than your entire army combined. Silence fell across the snow. Eve's throat tightened with emotion. She dreamed of this moment, of Fenric defending her, choosing her, standing up for her against the wolves who'd mocked her. But hearing it actually happen, hearing the fierce pride in his voice, made it real in a way dreams never could. Corvus stepped forward carefully. My king, I understand you're grateful for her help. But gratitude and the mate bond are different things. You don't have to. I love her. Fenric's voice was flat. Absolute. I choose her. She is my mate, my queen, my future. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me directly. He paused, letting his alpha dominance roll across the assembled wolves, a pressure so intense that several guards dropped to their knees involuntarily. I'm offering one chance, Fenric continued. Accept Eve as your queen or leave my service. Choose now. The guards exchanged glances. Some looked uncertain, others seemed angry, but slowly, one by one, they knelt. All except Corvus. The beta stood firm, his jaw clenched. I've served House Drathmore for 30 years. I served your father before you. I've given my life to protecting the throne. I know, Fenric said quietly. Which is why I'm giving you the choice instead of killing you where you stand. You would truly choose her over your beta? Over your kingdom's stability? Yes. No hesitation. Without question. Corvus stared at Fenric for a long moment. Then his eyes shifted to Eve. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away despite her weakness. You are nothing, Corvus said. A wolfless orphan who should have died in obscurity. And now you stand there as if you have the right to... She has every right. Kale's voice cut across the snow. The Frostclaw Alpha stepped forward, and his warriors flanked him. The North recognizes her sacrifice. The North honors her courage. The North will defend her against any who seek to harm her. The North doesn't speak for the South, Corvus shot back. No, but I do. Fenric's voice was ice. And I'm telling you, Corvus, for the last time, kneel to your queen or leave. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Corvus sighed, and something in his rigid posture softened. He looked old suddenly, tired. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. "But you're the king. It's your right to make it." He dropped to one knee, his head bowed. The remaining guards followed suit, a wave of submission spreading across the snow. Eve felt tears prick her eyes. Not because they'd accepted her, she'd stopped caring about their acceptance weeks ago, but because Fenric had fought for her, had risked everything for her, had chosen her over politics, over power, over the easy path. "Rise," Fenric commanded. The guard stood. "We return to Silver Peak immediately, and when we arrive, we'll make an announcement. Eve Ashenmore is my mate and your queen. The coronation will be in 3 days." "My king," one of the council members spoke up hesitantly. "The people will have questions about her past, her condition." "Then we'll answer them." Fenric's hand squeezed Eve's. "Truthfully, all of it. The rejection, the transformation, the sacrifice. Let them know exactly what their queen gave up to save them." The return journey to Silver Peak took 5 days. Eve rode in a litter for the first two, too weak to walk far. By the 3rd day, she could manage a few hours on foot. By the 5th, she felt almost normal, just human normal, not Lycan normal. It was strange being so fragile. When a branch snapped, she couldn't hear it from a mile away. When the wind shifted, she couldn't scent what it carried. When danger approached, she had no enhanced senses to warn her. She was vulnerable in a way she'd never been, even before her transformation. But Fenric was always there, walking beside her, supporting her when she stumbled, standing between her and any perceived threat. And gradually, Eve began to understand something. She didn't need Lycan's strength to be strong. She'd survived the orphanage without power. She'd endured years of mockery and abuse with only her will to sustain her. She'd walked through the black ice on determination alone. Her strength had never come from her wolf. It had come from her. On the evening of the 5th day, they crested a ridge and saw Silver Peak Castle in the distance. The massive fortress gleamed in the sunset, banners snapping in the wind. Eve's breath caught. The last time she'd seen this place, she'd been rejected in front of thousands. Humiliated, broken. Now she was returning as queen. "Having second thoughts?" Fenric asked quietly. "About 100. Eve tried to smile. "What if they hate me? What if they refuse to accept a human queen? Then they'll learn to live with disappointment." Fenric took her hand. "But Eve, I won't force you into this. If you don't want to be queen, if you want to walk away and live quietly somewhere, I'll abdicate. We'll find a small cabin in the mountains, live simply, just the two of us." Eve stared at him. "You'd give up your throne? Your kingdom?" "I'd give up everything for you." Fenric's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "I already lost you once because I chose power over you. I won't make that mistake again." Eve's heart swelled, but she shook her head. "You're a good king, Fenric. Your people need you. And I—" She looked at the castle, at the kingdom spread below. "I didn't sacrifice everything just to hide. I want to stand beside you. I want to help you rule. I want to show them that strength isn't just about claws and fangs." Fenric smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "Then let's show them what a real queen looks like." They entered Silver Peak at noon the next day. Word had spread of their approach, and the entire city turned out to watch. Thousands of wolves lined the streets, their faces a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and awe. Eve rode beside Fenric on a white mare, her back straight despite her exhaustion. She wore simple traveling clothes. No crown, no jewels, nothing to hide behind. Just herself. As they passed, she heard the whispers. "That's her? The wolfless one? She looks so ordinary. They say she was a Lycan Queen, that she saved us all." "That's impossible. Look at her, she's human." Eve kept her eyes forward, her chin high. Let them whisper, let them doubt. She knew what she'd done. She knew what she'd sacrificed. That was enough. The castle courtyard was packed. The High Council stood on the steps, their faces carefully neutral. Lady Seraphine was there, her beautiful features tight with barely concealed fury. Other nobles, dignitaries, alphas from neighboring packs, all watching as Fenric dismounted and helped Eve down from her horse. "People of Silver Peak," Fenric's voice carried across the courtyard, "I stand before you with news that will change our kingdom. This woman, Eve Ashenmore, is my fated mate, my chosen queen, and she is also the savior who prevented the North's destruction. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many of you witnessed me reject her weeks ago. I stand before you now and admit I was wrong. Grievously, shamefully wrong. I saw a wolfless orphan and assumed I knew her worth. I let pride and fear guide my decision instead of heart and truth. Fenric took Eve's hand, raising it high. But Eve Ashenmore is no ordinary woman. She is the last of the Lycan bloodline, an ancient race that predates our kingdoms. When an entity called Morveth threatened to consume the North, Eve willingly sacrificed her Lycan power to restore the seal that protects us all. She gave up everything, her strength, her wolf, her very identity, to save people who had never shown her kindness. The courtyard was silent now, every eye fixed on them. She is braver than any warrior I've known, stronger than any alpha, wiser than any council. Fenric's voice roughened with emotion. She is my mate, my queen, my choice, and I will stand with her against anyone who challenges that. Anyone. He paused, letting his words sink in. So I ask you now, will you accept Eve Ashenmore as your queen? Will you honor the sacrifice she made? Will you follow her as you follow me? For a long moment, no one moved. Then an old woman pushed through the crowd, bent with age, leaning on a walking stick. She stopped before Eve and looked up with rheumy eyes. "You're the one who saved us?" she asked, her voice cracked with age. "Yes," Eve said simply. "My grandson lives in the northern villages, near the black ice. He would have died if you'd failed. I'm glad he's safe." The old woman studied Eve for another moment. Then she dropped to her knees, her forehead touching the ground. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my family." One by one, others followed. Not the nobles, not the council, but the common wolves. The farmers and hunters and craftsmen. The mothers and fathers. The ones who understood that Eve's sacrifice had saved their children. They knelt. Within minutes, half the courtyard was on their knees. Then 3/4. The wave of submission spread until even the nobles had no choice but to kneel or stand out as traitors. Lady Seraphine was the last to kneel, her face twisted with rage. Eve looked across the sea of bowed heads and felt something shift inside her. Not power returning, that was gone forever, but purpose, understanding. She'd spent her life wanting to be seen, to matter, to be worth something. And now she understood she'd always mattered, always been worth something. It had never been about what she could do or what power she possessed. It had been about who she was willing to become. Fenric squeezed her hand. "My queen," he said softly. Eve smiled. "My king." The coronation 3 days later was the largest gathering in Silver Peak's history. Alphas came from across the north and even the south, curious to see the human queen who'd sacrificed Lycan power to save them all. Eve wore a gown of silver and white, simple but elegant. No crown yet. That would come during the ceremony. Her hair was braided with winter flowers. She looked like what she was, human, mortal, and beautiful in her ordinariness. The ceremony took place in the Great Hall, with thousands watching. The High Shaman performed the traditional rites, blessing the union between alpha and mate. Fenric made his vows first, to protect, to cherish, to stand beside Eve until death. Then it was Eve's turn. She looked out at the assembled crowd, wolves who'd mocked her, rejected her, hunted her. Wolves who now watched with a mix of awe and uncertainty. "I won't lie to you," Eve said, her voice clear. "I'm not what you expected in a queen. I can't shift. I can't fight as you fight. I'll age and die like any human, but I can promise you this. I will serve you with everything I have. I will stand beside your king and help him rule fairly. I will remember what it's like to be powerless, to be overlooked, to be nothing, and I will fight for those who can't fight for themselves." She paused. "I gave up my power to save you, and I'd do it again. Not because you deserved it, not because you were kind to me, but because it was right. Because protecting the innocent, even those who hurt you, is what being a queen means." She met Fenric's eyes. "I accept you as my mate. I accept your kingdom as my responsibility. And I accept the weight of this crown, knowing I'll never be the queen you expected, but I'll be the queen you need." The shaman placed the crown on her head. Delicate silver worked into the shape of intertwined wolves beneath twin moons. I present to you, the shaman called out, Queen Eve Drathmore, mate to the Alpha King, protector of the North, the last Lycan Queen who sacrificed all to save us. The hall erupted in howls, the traditional wolf celebration. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, beautiful. Fenric pulled Eve close and kissed her, in front of everyone, claiming her publicly as his. When they finally broke apart, Eve was crying. But this time, they were happy tears. That night, after the feast and celebrations had finally ended, Eve and Fenric stood alone on the castle's highest balcony. The twin moons hung overhead, Lunara and Noctara casting their silver and crimson light across the kingdom. Any regrets? Fenric asked, his arm around her waist. Eve thought about it. She thought about the power she'd lost, the strength, the magnificent feeling of running as a Lycan, of being something ancient and powerful. She thought about Moira, the spirit companion she'd never get to speak with again. But she also thought about the children in the northern villages who were safe now, the families who'd been saved, the world that would continue because of her choice. And she thought about Fenric standing beside her, choosing her every day. No, she said softly. No regrets. Fenric pulled her closer. I love you. I love you too. Eve leaned against him. Even though you're an arrogant, stubborn, impossible wolf who rejected me in front of your entire kingdom, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that. Good. You should. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moons. In the distance, Eve could see the Thornwood Forest where her transformation had begun. Beyond that, the Frost Peak Mountains where she'd saved the world. What happens now? She asked. Now? Fenric smiled. Now we rule. Together. We build a kingdom that values courage over power, that protects the weak instead of exploiting them, that remembers what you taught us, that true strength isn't about claws and fangs. It's about choosing to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. That's a lot of responsibility. Yes, but we'll handle it together. Fenric turned her to face him. You and me, Alpha and Queen, mates, partners. Equals, Eve added. Equals, Fenric agreed. He kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of promise. And in that moment, Eve Ashenmore, orphan, reject, the last Lycan Queen, finally understood what she'd been searching for her whole life. She didn't need to be powerful to matter. She didn't need to be special to be loved. She just needed to be herself, and that was enough. Far to the north, beyond the Frost Peak Mountains, the seal held strong. The black ice continued its slow retreat. The corruption that had threatened to consume the world was contained once more, bound by the sacrifice of a queen who'd given everything. In the northern villages, they built shrines to her, not to the powerful Lycan she'd been for a few short weeks, but to the human woman who'd chosen sacrifice over survival. Songs spread across the kingdoms, ballads about the last queen who'd walked through darkness and emerged mortal but victorious. Children grew up hearing her story, learning that courage wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most powerful. It was about doing what was right, no matter the cost. And in Silver Peak Castle, Eve and Fenric ruled together for 40 years. They never had children. Eve's human body couldn't bear wolf-blooded young, but they didn't need heirs to leave a legacy. They changed the kingdom. Under their rule, orphans were protected instead of abandoned. The powerless were defended instead of exploited. Strength was measured not by dominance, but by character. Other kingdoms watched and slowly changed to follow their example. When Eve was 62 years old, her body finally failing after a life well lived, Fenric held her hand as she drew her last breaths. No regrets? He asked, his voice thick with tears. Eve smiled up at him, her face lined with age but her eyes still bright. Not a single one, she whispered. I was nothing. You made me everything. No, Fenric said, tears streaming down his face. You were always everything. I just finally learned to see it. Eve's eyes closed. Her last breath escaped in a sigh. And Fenric, who had ruled with strength and wisdom for decades, who had never shown weakness in front of anyone, threw back his head and howled his grief to the twin moons. The kingdom mourned for a month. Then they celebrated. Not her death, but her life. The woman who'd been nothing and became everything. The queen who'd taught them that true nobility came from choice, not birth. 300 years later, her story was still told. The last Lycan Queen who'd sacrificed immortal power for mortal love, who'd proven that strength came from character, not claws. And somewhere, in the space between one breath and the next, in the moment before sleep claims the conscious mind, the spirit of Eve Ashenmore smiled. She'd lived, she'd loved, she'd mattered, and in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. The world she'd saved continued to spin. Children laughed. Wolves ran beneath the twin moons, and the seal she'd restored with her sacrifice held strong, protecting the world, just as she'd promised, just as a queen should.